So like I said, my name is Peter. I'm a program coordinator here with ACMP. And I'd first of all like to thank everyone here for joining us tonight. I understand that there's a pandemic going on, and I would like to acknowledge that it is difficult for some people to join under those circumstances. So we really do appreciate everyone who's shown us love and support during this time. And I would also like to acknowledge that I am in Ottawa, so the land that we are currently sitting on is traditionally the unceded territory, the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to be present here in this territory. And so I would like to send it actually to Adele. So if you could play the video, that's just going to give you a little bit more context about what ACMP is, what we do, and some of the initiatives that we have through the organization. So ACMP is a mentorship program that's focused on supporting the success and development of Afro-Caribbean and Black students. And we realize that these students face a unique set of challenges during their education and their time at university. And so ACMP tries to help these students by positioning them to overcome those challenges.
Well, I consider myself youth, I guess. I'm 19. So I think I love hearing this question on how we can, make the youth want to go to post-secondary. That's something I'm very passionate about. And as Warren just mentioned, I'm so beyond grateful I got the chance at Carleton to learn about the ACMP because I believe in mentorship. I think it's so important for youth to see themselves in this position and have someone to kind of guide them, especially when there's in predominantly white institutions.
Mental health concern. It doesn't have to come in the form of the N-word. You already see this a lot in our institutions, high schools, universities. We see this a lot when we come to know that our Black students majority of them are being streamlined to applied courses and not academic courses, which derails their moments or their opportunity to get into post-secondary education. That in itself is anti-Black or connects to anti-Black racism. It also connects to creating a barrier to education. It also connects to the stripping of your right to knowledge.
Extrovert. I want students to feel comfortable. We're a community, and that's like the power of the community, right? Is feeling comfort and feeling supported and not feel alienated. So that's like one thing I want students to know is you're not alone, you're supported, and you got this. And it's just all love, all support all around.
Thanks, Adele. I'm going to send it over to Warren, who's going to take a quick second to tell you a little bit more about ACMP and some of the things we have coming up in store after tonight's event, which is the final event of our Mental Health Wellness Month. So thank you, Warren. Please, if you don't mind taking it from here.
Thank you, Peter. Much appreciated. I trust everyone as well during these continuing challenging times with this pandemic, and please be well, you and your family. Thanks for being here. As Peter said, this is the last of our mental health awareness campaign for January. It doesn't mean that this discussion should stop. It just means that we are taking this moment, this entire month, to acknowledge what mental health, knowledge of mental health concerns in our African descent communities, and finding ways where we can provide a sense of ease to many of our community members. And also, I would like to mention it's an opportunity to educate folks who are non-African descent and how they can learn and work and help work through these problems in terms of if they're counselors or psychologists themselves to learn through these moments that we are sharing. I also want to mention that, the last three events, and this is our fourth one, we have been experiencing a lot of vulnerabilities. A lot of people have been sharing. A lot of people have been, not only sharing, but, finding the courage to share. And, being vulnerable is not an easy thing. And being vulnerable amongst people that you don't know is definitely not an easy thing. So for those who shared and you're here, and if you're not here, I'm sending you positive energy, and I trust that these sessions or these events helped in one way or another. And please, 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 if you need to seek any supports, please look at the ACMP website. We do have a list of supports that you can access there, or please speak to people who you trust who can provide you access to supports that for your well-being. It's important. So outside of the events, the ACMP has been focusing on a series of events for the last 4 years that focus on networking skills, financial literacy, and then we have coming up our Black History Month event. So we're going to show the poster in 3, 2, 1. There! Oh, look at that! Bingo! All right, so on February 25th, we are hosting our 4th annual Black History Month event. We are very honored to have 3 keynote addressees. One who is the first is the Honorable High Commissioner of Barbados, Glenn Clark. Yes, he is my uncle, so I pulled a favor there. And we also have Honorable Greg Fergus, who's a Liberal MP, and Superintendent of one of the Winnipeg school boards here, Michelle John Paul. So we have an amazing lineup. Please visit the ACMP website for more information. And if you are a student, particularly in high school or post-secondary education, we will be offering book bursaries. So if you know anybody who is has amazing marks or doing things in their community, please send them our way so they can have a chance to win one of the book bursaries. To qualify, we are asking for a description of their GPA or grades, also the community work that they do, and anything that they're doing in the academic spaces as well that will add to their trajectory and what they want to inspire if they're high school students in post-secondary education. So I really appreciate everyone. I'm not going to dominate because this is not about Warren. This is about us and how we can support one another. So we have some really amazing guest speakers, and I'm going to shift it back to Peter. Thank you very much and enjoy tonight's event.
Thanks for that, Warren. Appreciate it. So before I get started, I just want to remind everyone of a couple of things. We are hosting this event online, but we do want to give space to our invited guests who will be leading our workshop today. And so what does that mean? That means that if you have a contribution that you would like to share as a member of the audience, we ask that you kindly raise your hand, and you can do that either by turning on your camera and physically raising your hand, or you can go to the bottom of your screen where it says reactions, and you can click the button that says raise hand. And this is just going to ensure that we are respectful of our presenters and their time, because they are putting a lot of effort forward to share their expertise with us today. And so without further ado, I would actually like to introduce the 2 professionals that we have that will be leading our workshop tonight. Our first guest is Saran James-Vaughn. So Saran is the founder of Wellness by Saran, a full-service holistic wellness education platform dedicated to menstrual health and a decolonized approach to well-being. By combining the latest evidence-based research on diet and nutrition, ancient alchemy tools, and herbal medicine, Saran supports the journey of identifying the root causes of chronic illness, helping the body, mind, and soul, and returning to balance. She is also a cultural curator, educator, and advocate, creating safe learning spaces for Afro-diasporic youth at an intersection of wellness, art, and culture. Welcome, Saran. Our second guest, who some of you may recognize from last year's event, is Meghan Stewart. Meghan is a certified lead coach through Unified Mindfulness, located in Ottawa, Canada, on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. Identifying as she or her, Meghan is a multiracial Black woman with a Jamaican heritage. Her philanthropy experiences include advising for Uniting for Children and Youth, an active member of the OCDSB Advisory Committee on Equity, a temporary role in 2020 as chair of Parents for Diversity, and now actively a volunteer within their education committee. In March of 2021, Meghan launched the Mindful Educator Program as part of the new teacher induction program for the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Currently, she supports children and youth in schools within the GTA, Ottawa, and Gatineau area related to anti-discrimination and wellness initiatives. Featured in CBC as one of 10 women in the Ottawa area building community by supporting and promoting wellness, and mindfulness is accessible to harness in our emancipation of mental slavery. It empowers self-awareness, self-mastery, and equanimity. Welcome, Meghan. And so without further ado, I would like to pass it off to our guests who are here to share their amazing gifts with us. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Can you see the screen? Yes, thumbs up. Okay. Welcome. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm sure Saran will echo me in the gratitude for such a wonderful introduction and being honored to be a part of ACMP anytime they ask for support, because the work they do is really important. Saran will be presenting in English. Moi, je parle en français, so we will do a mix of French and English. However, all of our slides will be in French and in English. So if you have any questions at the end and they're French, you can direct them to me, and Saran can respond in English, and I can translate the best that I can for anybody who speaks French. Moi, je parle français. Si vous avez des questions, à la fin, quand on demande des questions, juste demandez les questions en français à moi, et Saran, je vais traduire qu'est-ce que Saran dit aussi, si c'est nécessaire pour vous aussi. On va être inclusive. We want to be inclusive here. And we know that language can sometimes be a barrier. So it's great that we're able to try to offer this in a more inclusive language-wise way as well. So let me move along. All right. I will start with French and then I'll move on to English. Je vous présente Saran James-Vaughn. Elle est une éducatrice santé menstruelle, un coach en mieux-être et une conservatrice de culture. Je suis un coach en pleine conscience. Nous sommes passionnés de te parler aujourd'hui de la sujet de santé mentale et on est reconnaissante d'être ici avec vous. So Saran is Peter had mentioned, a menstrual health educator, a wellness coach, and a cultural curator. She's actually located in the Greater Toronto area, but we work across wherever we can, whenever we can work together. So we're really grateful to be here because the subject of mental health is incredibly important to both of us. All right. So Peter was kind enough to do a land acknowledgement. We have a translated one more specific to the Toronto area here. So we just want to acknowledge this as well in French. Nous reconnaissons que la terre sur laquelle nous nous réunissons est le territoire traditionnel de nombreuses nations, notamment la Mississauga du Crédit, les Anishinaabeg, les Chippewas, les Haudenosaunee et les Wendat, et abrite maintenant de nombreux peuples diversifiés des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis. Nous reconnaissons également que Toronto est couvert par le traité 13 avec les Mississauga du Crédit. I just want to give that opportunity to also give a translated version of the acknowledgement. So what will we be covering today? We'll be looking at mindful awareness, so meditation and the skills of being mindfully aware, la méditation et les compétences de la pleine conscience, radical self-awareness, the power of self-awareness, prends soin de soi radicalement, le pouvoir de la conscience de soi, the mind-body connection, emotional awareness and habits, la connexion corps-esprit, conscience émotionnelle et habitude, self-care through community, exploring identity and nonviolent communication, prends soin de soi par la communauté, explorer l'identité et la communication non violente, and a self-care toolkit that we'll wrap up with as well. But all of this is a self-care toolkit, une boîte à outils de soins personnels. So I will jump back and forth in French as much as I can, but again, we will have the French on the slides too. All right, radical self-awareness and mindful awareness. What is self-awareness? Qu'est-ce que c'est la conscience de soi? We hear this a lot. What does it mean? We're going to get into it. Why is it important? Exploring our individual responsibility of self-awareness. Pourquoi est-ce que c'est important? Explorer la responsabilité individuelle de la conscience de soi. And then we'll talk about how is that applicable? How do we apply being present in tangible action? Appliquer être présent dans les actions tangibles. Self-awareness allows you to be present with yourself while being present with others using attentional skills of mindful awareness. What are these three skills? You can see them on the screen right now. Concentration, sensory clarity, lucidité sensorielle, and equanimity. And Peter, you did a great job of saying that word. That is a word in the mindfulness field that is well known, but outside of it, admittedly, it's the first time I had heard it was when I got into mindfulness. So in French, we've translated it as sérénité, because it's not quite in the language yet, but I'll explain what it is in a little bit more detail. So these skills that we'll be introducing you to today only enhance your ability to be fully present, so that you can make an informed choice with what you're aware of within and how you're perceiving what you're experiencing internally in any given interaction. La pleine conscience de soi permet de rester présent pour vous-même et à les autres, en utiliser les compétences additionnelles de la pleine conscience. Ces compétences ne font qu'améliorer votre capacité à être pleinement présent afin que vous puissiez faire un choix éclairé en fonction de ce dont vous êtes conscient à l'intérieur et de la façon dont vous percevez ce que vous vivez à l'extérieur dans une interaction donnée. Often, how we perceive the present moment is based on many intersecting aspects of our overall being, psyche included. It is our individual responsibility to know ourselves, to commit to continually getting to know ourselves, but not as an overly self-involved action, as an action of commitment to our greater good. Il est de notre responsabilité individuelle de nous connaître et de nous engager à nous connaître continuellement, mais pas comme une action trop égocentrique, comme une action d'engagement pour notre plus grand bien. When we are self-aware, we can practice radical empathy. We can be objective, compassionate, flexible, and yes, uncomfortable without that discomfort dictating our reaction. Lorsque nous sommes conscients de nous-mêmes, nous pouvons pratiquer une empathie radicale. Nous pouvons être objectifs, compatissants, flexibles et, oui, mais à l'aise sans que ce malaise ne dicte nos réactions. We can see our patterns that have helped us cope and manage some of the most difficult adversities in life with compassion, not as a problem to be fixed, but to be celebrated. All right. So we can share the same compassion with others that may not be aware of patterns that impact them in a restrictive way, because we've committed to seeing that within ourselves and choosing acceptance, we can accept others as well as they are. Let's get into what it actually means to be present. I'm going to do a quick active guided meditation, which means we don't need to close our eyes. On va faire méditation maintenant, mais vous ne doit pas fermer les yeux, c'est d'accord. Juste fait avec moi, avec les yeux ouverts. We're going to do it in action, okay? So let's go back to those 3 attentional skills. So concentration, concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. You're going to bring your awareness to yourself, which is concentration. So we're turning towards ourselves right now. If you have a phone, if you have a TV in the background, that's okay. Maybe put your phone down, allow the TV to play in the background. Vous amenez votre conscience à vous-même, concentration. Vous identifiez sur quoi votre attention et votre conscience se posant dans une catégorie. You're going to notice where your awareness falls, and you're going to categorize it. So are you seeing something? Are you hearing something? Or are you feeling something? On the presentation, you can see here, I've got it in French and English. So, je réveille, je regarde autour de moi, je vois des couleurs, je vois des gens. So what are you seeing? Qu'est-ce qu'on voit? Qu'est-ce qu'on entend? What are we hearing? Is it internal in the mind chatter? Is it noises like the sound of my voice, noises in your home? Or what are you feeling? And that could be feeling in terms of your body, dans ton corps. It could be feeling in terms of emotions, les émotions. Et tous les 3 choses, qu'est-ce qu'on entend, qu'est-ce qu'on voit et qu'est-ce qu'on sent dans notre corps et notre émotion, peut être quelque chose qui est présent dans nous maintenant. Mais c'est d'accord si c'est les 3. It's okay if all 3 of them are showing up. Just to be present right now with ourselves is what the goal is. If you want to close your eyes, you can absolutely do so. I invite you to do that as well, just for a moment. And just notice what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what you're feeling. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to try to control it. You don't need to change the environment externally that you're in. We're just going to notice what's showing up within ourselves. So just take a moment to turn towards yourself and notice what's present for you. And as you notice it, if it's see, hear, or feel, you're going to almost like check mark it mentally. Allow it to fade or to expand. Take a couple breaths with it. And notice on that next exhale, what's present for you. And so if you're moving, that would be in feel. Si vous respirez, ça c'est aussi dans le sens du corps. If you're breathing and you're noticing the breath, that's also in feel. So just taking a moment to be with yourself. Permettez à tout ce qui apparaît dans votre conscience d'être présent tel qu'il est, même en remarquant que l'esprit et le corps essaient de l'éviter, de la changer ou de la contrôler. Soyez curieuse de savoir comment vous la vivez dans vos catégories sensorielles. So allow whatever that shows up in your awareness to be present as it is, even in noticing the mind and the body trying to avoid or change or control it. Get curious about how you experience that in your sensory signals. This is a practice of getting to know yourself. Maybe it's your first time meditating and you're noticing judgment, you're noticing restlessness. That's okay. It's all okay. Just getting to spend quality time with yourself. And any experience you have as we start to step out of this meditation, opening your eyes if they're closed, any experience you have can be broken down into see, hear, and feel as a sensory category. And we'll get into that a little bit further as we move into this workshop. So I'm going to pass it off to Saran. Je vais le donner à Saran maintenant pour faire une visualisation. So for a safe space visualization.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's really awesome to be here. I just want to thank both Meghan and Peter for the wonderful introduction. So to get started, we want to do a safe space visualization. So Meghan just explained how to kind of get into your body, that sensory awareness, and we want to take it a little bit of a step further and visualize a safe space that becomes an anchor. This helps to settle the nervous system. It helps to create that body awareness. And so we're gonna just plant our feet on the ground if you're sitting, hopefully. Get really comfortable, okay? You can close your eyes if you want to. It's probably helpful if you do. And I want you to take a couple of deep breaths in and out. All right, so I want you to imagine a person, a place, a pet, or an object that brings you joy or comfort. So allow the image of this to come into your mind's eye, into your awareness. So this could be, if it's a place, it could be, a lush forest with an incredible canopy, or it could be the waves at a beach. Once you've have this picture in your mind, notice your surroundings. What do you hear? What do you smell? So if you're at the beach, are you smelling like the seaweed? If you are, on the mountaintop, are you hearing the wind? If this point of comfort is represented by a person, this could be a grandmother, it could be a parent, it could be an ancestor. What is it about them that brings you comfort? Imagine the smile on their face. Imagine the touch of their touch on your skin or your interaction with them. I invite you to settle into this feeling of comfort that you experience with this object, person, or place. Allow your heart to calm down and notice your shoulders relax. So this safe point will be your anchor as we move through this workshop this evening. If you have any uncomfortable or unpleasant sensory signals and you need to return to this safe space, it is always available to you. So if you feel like you need to really ground, if something doesn't feel quite right, just step back into that safe space to bring your body and your nervous system back into a place of ease. And now I'll turn it back over to Meghan.
Thank you. It's beautiful. All right, so for our next practice, we'll explore intentions. So you can hear me. Let's start with setting an intention for today, for this evening. And that's whatever speaks to you. For this practice, explore what the meditation offered you now in real life as you are setting your intention. Nous allons explorer les intentions. Commençons par définir une intention pour l'atelier ou pour la journée ou la soirée, selon que ce qui vous parle. Pour cette pratique, explorez ce que la méditation vous a offert maintenant dans la vie réel alors que vous définissez votre intention. So an intention is how do I show up, not a goal or an objective necessarily. It's how do we show up to maybe a goal or an objective. So for example, it could be something as simple as to be open, to be flexible, to invite love in, to be filled with compassion, and to honor whatever speaks to you now in 5 words or less, juste en 5 mots ou comment dire en français, less, et utiliser ces mots pour comment est-ce que je veux me montrer à moi-même, à cette session, et autres personnes qui est présent ici ou présent dans ma maison ou dans ma vie. How do I want to show up to myself, this session, and others present? Do I notice any resistance present within me? And using that same awareness of what am I seeing, what am I hearing, and what am I feeling as you approach this practice. I know sometimes I'll be writing an intention. I'm like, yeah, right. I'll hear the inner chatter. Yeah, right. Like you're going to be able to stay compassionate all day. I have all this stuff going on in our society right now. Da, 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 da. And so I hear the resistance and I'm present with it. And I bring equanimity to it, which is that ability to accept it as it shows up. Not try to change it or control it or continue to engage in judging myself for it, but to recognize I'm not the thought. I'm just having a thought. And allow that wave to flow and to be with it. And so just taking a moment, if you have a pen and paper, to do that, or just to bring it into your awareness. Intentions are incredibly important. Intentions allow us to, for example, if we'll get into values and so on in a bit, but if I have the value of respect or honesty, and my intention for the day is to honor myself, or to be compassionate, or to be open. If my behaviors don't match that value and that intention, it doesn't really matter what the intention is or what the value is, because I haven't taken time to be intentional about how I show up to those things that I claim to be near and dear to my heart and very important to me. So it's important for us to recognize that we can have the best of intentions and still have negative outcomes and impacts on others. So to be able to be intentional also means having our behavior match that intention, having our output match that intention, and to be gentle with ourselves, because there are going to be times in the day that might be tested. And that's where the equanimity comes in, to be self-compassionate about whatever shows up. So I'm going to pass it on to Saran.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about emotional habits and naming our emotions. Our primary emotions, according to the Plutchik wheel, which you can see here on the screen, are anger, anticipation, joy, fear, trust, surprise, sadness, and disgust. And all other feelings stem from those core emotions. I know sometimes it can get confusing. For example, I've heard folks say things like, I feel abandoned. But what is really at the root of that? What is the root emotion behind that statement? Is it sadness? Is it grief? Emotions are a direct sensory experience that we need to embrace and give space. So there are no bad emotions. And it's a good idea to reflect on the emotions that you tend to shy away from the most. Is it grief? Is it sadness? Is it anger? Anger specifically is can be quite a difficult emotion to manage, because we are not taught in our early years healthy outlets for anger. We think that it's one of the emotions that we need to suppress or we shouldn't experience. But this can really lead to long-term resentment and rage that is easily triggered. Have you ever noticed yourself overreacting to seemingly benign situations? Sometimes this may be rooted in unresolved emotions that get stuck in the body. Okay, next slide, please, Meghan.
I'm going to do a quick translation of a couple of things that you said.
Yes.
One key thing. There are no bad emotions. Il n'y a pas de mauvaises émotions, pas même la colère. On a des choses dans notre famille et dans la société et dans l'école qu'on entend qui dit que les émotions comme colère est mauvaise, mais c'est pas une émotion mauvaise. Et quand on pense que c'est une émotion mauvaise, on n'est pas dans la sérénité avec cette émotion. On ne sait pas comment expresser cette émotion. Et ça, c'est pas bon pour notre santé mentale. All right, and now I'll switch. There you go.
Okay, all right. So the thought-emotion connection. So emotions are a nervous system response to stimuli from your mental or physical environment. Your body is constantly picking up subtle cues from your environment, and this includes your thoughts. In your physical environment, this might look like allergens from a plant. You might be hearing, laughter from a baby or feeling warm sunshine on your skin. Those are that's stimulus from your environment that your nervous system is going to respond to. Your body is taking all of this information and processing it through your nervous system, which leads to different emotional responses. So here's a really good example of this. You see a puppy in the park running towards you, and you have a passion for dogs. That is something happening in your physical environment that is causing sensations in your body and feelings of joy. The opportunity is to be completely present at that moment and notice where in your body, where you're experiencing that emotion in your body. So a really key takeaway here is that you feel your emotions and you think your thoughts. There's a difference. Sometimes we intellectualize the feelings or the emotions, right? And it's natural to want to bring language to what we're experiencing, but the experience of emotions is one that is in the physical body. Sometimes we believe that we can think about our emotions, and this is where we lose the opportunity to observe and move them through our body as soon as they arise. So emotions are not meant to stay in our body. You get a environmental stimuli, you have the response, and then you allow it to dissipate. But often we ruminate, we attach our intellect, and that now turns the emotion into a mood. And your mood can carry you throughout the whole day. So it's the exercises that we did in the beginning where you're staying present and staying in the moment and noticing is giving your body a chance to move the emotions through.
Translate. So, in the best I can. Notre système nerveux autonome entre actions, en particulier le système nerveux sympathique, pour nous protéger et nous assurer que nous survivons à ce danger. Voyons pourquoi j'ai dit perçu. Tout d'abord, nous devons examiner l'inconfort et la façon dont il peut affecter notre perception du danger. L'inconfort peut nous pousse à nous éloigner, mais comment se sent, s'entend et ressemble l'inconfort pour chacune d'entre nous? Qu'est-ce que nous met mal à l'aise? Comment la ressentons-nous? And go ahead, Saran. I'll switch sides. Oh, it's Meghan. All right, so what you're looking at here, if you look at the two black arrows, on one side where it says les désirs, that is desire or craving. On the other side where it says le dégoût is aversion or avoidance. Now, many of you may have noticed, because I noticed it, when you're in a meditation practice, which is you're dedicating time to being present with yourself. Quand vous êtes dans une méditation et tu pratiques la concentration, vous êtes avec vous et pas beaucoup de distractions. There's not a lot of distractions that are present necessarily. You are choosing to dedicate time to be present with yourself. This is when you notice the human being experience. This is when you notice what's happening in the background. This is when you notice that there is desire and that there's aversion, la désir et le dégoût. So let's say, for example, you notice anger, la colère. Tu vois la colère dans vous and you don't want to be angry. Tu veux pas être colère. Tu veux pas avoir cette expérience sensorielle. You don't want to have a sensory signal of anger, but it's present. So we try to avoid it in whatever way that looks, because maybe the judging of ourselves makes us uncomfortable. It causes unpleasant sensations in the body. You notice the body temperature, you're heating up. You're like, I don't want to be sweating. Why is this happening? I just want this feeling or this thought that is also happening with this feeling to go away. We're human beings, we're not human havings. We're a being in all of our perceptions of the present moment, moment by moment. Nous sommes des êtres humains, donc nous ne sommes pas là pour faire. Nous sommes des êtres dans toutes nos perceptions du moment présent à chaque instant. How many of you have heard the term unlearning? Combien d'entre vous ont déjà entendu le terme, I'm going to try to say this, désapprentissage? I think I got it. Well, unfortunately, we can't unlearn anything. It's not the way our cognitive mind works. The only way out is in, literally. Malheureusement, nous ne pouvons rien désapprendre. Notre esprit cognitif ne fonctionne pas de cette façon. La seule façon de sortir est de rentrer, littéralement. Your ability to be contemplative and practice concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity will be the way out. Votre capacité de contempler et de pratiquer la concentration, la clarté sensorielle et de rester passif est la façon de s'en sortir. So the only way out is in, sorry to tell you. And that equanimity allows us to be present with whatever's showing up with us. Because you know what happens when you're present with every scenario as it is, you're hearing your truth, you're experiencing what's true to you. And then you can decide versus just react on autopilot to everything that's going on that within you. And you can decide, okay, I'm having a thought that this was like this experience. I swear this person's playing me like a fool. I'm going to react the way I should have reacted that time when I played that out of my head many times, which is to not be the fool this time, because that's how I'm perceiving this. And so we're just kind of enslaved to this mental story and this autopilot that's happening. The wonderful thing is, this is very primal. If we were really in danger, if we were really being chased by a bear, which is what are the signals that are showing up for us from a sensory perspective, when it's things like rejection or things like the fear of not fitting in, whatever those things may be, right? When we think we might be experiencing a racist experience. When we're experiencing these things, whether that is what it is or it isn't, we can choose how we want to show up. And this is where intentions come back in. What's my intention for the day today? To honor my truth, to honor my inner peace. Okay, is my inner peace going to stay intact if I set this person straight and set this boundary of, hey, you can't talk to me like that. That's not acceptable. Or you're telling me that this is not how I'm feeling, gaslighting, for example. You're telling me this is not how I'm feeling, but I'm in my feeling. I know how to be present with myself. I know this is how I'm feeling. And if that doesn't resonate with you, that's not my problem. And then being able to decide that that's how you're going to respond and move on with your day and continue to not self-sabotage and not self-betray yourself, what is going on within you, just to make somebody else comfortable or to fit in or whatever that may look like. So I'm going to pass it on to Saran. Let's go.
All right. So emotions that go unchecked in the body can lead to disease formation. So this is really an important point. In traditional Chinese medicine and other Eastern medical practices, it is believed that unresolved emotions have a particular affinity to certain organ systems in the body. For example, anger affects liver function, which can lead to poor filtration of toxins. For menstruating people who I work with all the time, poor filtration can lead to estrogen dominance and hormone imbalance. I'm walking you through this example to demonstrate the interconnectivity between our thoughts, emotions, and physical well-being. We often isolate the body from the mind and spirit, but they all work together as complex systems. Addressing the physical symptoms without acknowledging the environmental root cause does not lead to ultimate healing over the long term. So really think about if you're experiencing physical ailments, some of the areas that often gets triggered under a lot of stress is the stomach, changes in the menstrual cycle for menstruating people, as I mentioned. These are all signals that your mental or physical environment is affecting your physical body, or that you have unprocessed emotions that need to be moved through. All right, so next slide, please.
Just do a bit of translating.
Yeah.
Les émotions qui ne sont pas contrôlées dans le corps peuvent entraîner la formation de maladies. Par exemple, la colère affecte la fonction hépatique, ce qui peut entraîner une mauvaise filtration des toxines. Pour les personnes menstruées, une mauvaise filtration peut entraîner une dominance des oestrogènes et un déséquilibre hormonal. So I will move on.
All right, so I'm gonna guess that everybody knows who this person is on the screen. And I'll get to why I have this quote from him. So your mental environment, factors that impact our thoughts and beliefs. We've been in the midst of a pandemic for over 2 years now, and there are systemic changes that have been made that are outside of our control. So all the different mandates, not being able to go out, those are things that are not within our control. What is within our control are the thoughts we choose and the compassion we are able to offer ourselves as we move through these unprecedented times. So, how do your beliefs and identity impact how you cope in challenging times? We understand that no two people are going to have the same reaction to the same situation. So, I'm going to give you an example of this, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different beliefs, the different things that impact our identity. But Usain Bolt is a Jamaican sprinter, as you probably know, fastest man in the world. And Usain is a really great example of how cultural beliefs impact his ability to move through challenging times. Jamaicans value hard work. They are going to show up. They want to be the best at everything. This is a core part of the value system. So this forms part of his core belief about his ability to reach his goals, regardless of the difficulties that come his way. So he says, time, effort, sacrifice, and sweat. This is how you pay for your goals. These are his core beliefs, and this is what impacts his ability to be successful as an athlete. So reflecting on how culture is going to allow you to build resilience, what can you draw from? So for me, for example, it's cold, it's winter right now, it's no fun. It's been extremely frigid, but I put soca on. I play soca music because movement is a part of my culture and it's a part of my identity. I love music. I draw on this to help me to get through those challenging moments. You can't listen to a soca song and not feel good. I'm going to drink water and mind my business. Great reminder, right? That's a really popular song right now by Patrice Roberts. There's this energy of moving through challenges and like, yes, there are things that are happening, but we're going to get through it. So I draw on my cultural background to feel better, that's where my strength is coming from. So for Afro-diasporic people, it is so important for us to reconnect with our ancestry and our traditions. There are so many gems and tools for resilience hidden in plain sight. We do it through dancing, through movement, through music. We become wise through storytelling and proverbs. I cannot tell you how many times a proverb that my mother has said to me as a kid pops up in my mind when certain situations arise. These remind me to stay grounded, to find the wisdom. Meghan, over to you.
I'm going to move on to the next slide because I feel like that was translated well, but we might get questions at the end. Si vous avez des questions en français, enfin, c'est d'accord, juste nous demander, on peut vous aider. Okay, so I have this in French as well. Je vais montrer en français après ça. So Saran was talking about culture and cultural beliefs. Now, we all know that Blackness is based on our phenotype, so the melanated skin that we carry, and that the grouping of this, of people by our skin color is not necessarily something that's actually valid other than a structure that was created. When we look at our individuality within this grouping, right, and start to really honor that individuality, we're talking about understanding what our values are and exploring what those values are as individuals and collectively. We're also talking about cognitive beliefs, which typically show up in the shoulds and shouldn'ts. It's like, life should be fair. You should know this. It shouldn't be like this. So these are typically how therapists, if you do any therapy, would see this showing up. Cultural beliefs and conditioning. So the cultural beliefs, a great example was Usain Bolt. So cultural beliefs as a Jamaican may look like we like to work hard, right? Some other cultural beliefs can be even around the way that we communicate. So what may be perceived as anger or aggression, which we've seen this stereotype many times, is not actually factual to that emotion. It's just maybe the way culturally that we express ourselves. And so you may see from culture to culture, more animated, raised voices, more direct style of communication, and even the way that we have sayings. So when I was translating a lot of what I share typically in English into French, there are sayings that are just not going to translate. And the way that I might emphasize part of something may not be the same in French. And that can also be a part of cultural beliefs and conditioning. Conditioning can be also what would be seen as, you can see the example here, but it could be, for example, at this time, on these days, this is how you respond to waking up in the morning, or this is what you need to go to bed at night, or this is how a work week looks, or this is how a calendar year looks. This is how we celebrate the New Year's. This is how we celebrate the holidays. This is how we see the workday. And when a lot of this is built on in colonized structures, and we're not really questioning these things, right? We're kind of in that autopilot zone again. And it is up to us to then look at how this shapes our personality and our identity. Life experiences. I'll use the example of being in danger, right? And so the idea that an experience I had maybe with a bad breakup, or being excluded from an experience because of maybe my skin color, my gender, my sexual orientation, whatever that may look like. So every time I always say, if it smells like chicken, looks like chicken, tastes like chicken, it's got to be chicken, right? So that's kind of how our system works. Ooh, well, if it looks like that, smells like that, and tastes like that, it's got to be that. And we might just jump to the conclusion before we actually read the label. And so this metaphor I'm using in this example as well. So our life experiences can absolutely shape our personality and our identity. And so mindfulness allows us to be contemplative with that. It allows us to explore that. Conditioning, again, I've explained this as well. General conditioning is the practice that refers to the concept of a person being guided to react based on a stimulus. So there may be stimulus, for example, in the media. And so that stimulus that we're seeing in the media may cause us to respond to beauty standards, for example. This is what I'm supposed to do at this time in this situation. If I'm going to a job interview, I'm supposed to look like this. If I am presenting at something, I'm supposed to I need to wear these types of clothes for this. There may be a stimulus or stimuli that is leading us to making a big decision like that, but it can also be a really small thing, but we won't go into that because it's not a psych lecture. Morals, ethics, and principles. So morals, ethics, and principles can be individual, but morals are typically more of a collective thing. So we see this in religions, we see this in cultural groups and belief systems that are more collective, institutions, and so on. And so it's important to also say, is that what I really believe? Let me explore this a little bit further, right? And to really dive deep into all the things that may be impacting our personality and our identity day to day. So I'll just show it very quickly here in French as well. Okay. So la première, elle est valeurs. Et c'est important pour regarder à les voyeurs, les croyances cognitives, les croyances et conditionnements culturels, les expériences vécues, conditionnements moral, éthique et principes, avec avec la pleine conscience. Parce qu'avec la pleine conscience, on peut regarder ces choses et demander comment est-ce que toutes ces choses affectent mon personnalité et mon identité. Et on peut utiliser ça pour changer des choses qui sont pas des choses qui est bon pour nous quand on change avec la vie, quand on est plus vieux et chaque année on change peut-être les expériences vécues et ça change nous. La change est quelque chose qui est constant. C'est quelque chose qui arrive dans la nature, on voit avec les saisons, c'est quelque chose qui est vrai chaque journée et on doit regarder à nous-mêmes pour savoir comment on peut changer et comment la change arrive dans nous aussi. Et on peut faire ça avec la curiosité. Okay, so I'm going to share this beautiful poem that Marie-Daphné Laguerre shared with me, and it speaks to identity. And this was a poem, I cut it off a bit here, but it's okay. This speaks to what identity and personality and how we are always having intersecting identities and things that are impacting our identity and our personality. And this is a creative expression of it. So when Saran talks about creativity as a form of wellness, poetry, visual arts, performing arts, music, all of these things are paint, right? Painting, coloring, all of these visual arts, all these types of things are very important parts of creativity, important parts of our well-being. Play is a really important part of our ability to thrive and to move out of a survival mode response. So this poem, I'll share it in English and in French. My Africanity is a compliment to my beauty. Mixed with European ancestry, I carry the gene of the slave and the colonizer. So what does that make me? I must reconcile the two from duality to unity, so peace can occur. My hair, skin, and personality are to my soul what clothes are to my body. So what prevails above all is my humanity. Mon africanité est un complément à ma beauté, métissée d'héritage européen. Je porte en moi la gêne de l'esclave et du colonisateur. Alors, qu'est-ce que ça fait de moi? Je dois réconcilier les deux de la dualité à l'unité, afin que la paix puisse régner. Mes cheveux, mes peaux et ma personnalité recouvrent mon âme. Comme le vêtement recouvre mon corps, ne me juge point pour mon apparence, mais je t'invite plutôt à apprécier l'essence de mon humanité. So just wanted to share that. Thank you, Marie-Daphne, for sharing that with us. And you can find Marie-Daphne for consultation in anti-racism and inclusion work through Les Consultations Afro-Caribbean Consulting. All right, co-regulation, Saran.
Okay, so before I touch on this, I wanted to add one of the most critical elements that is impacting mental health, especially for young people today, and that is actually shaping identity, and that is the media. We take in a lot, right? Social media, we see the BBL culture, we see all of that. Self-perception is actually who we are as being on the screens in front of us, in our phones, in our hands. And so this is another reason why it's so critical to ground into who you are, right? Reach back into what is most valuable, because there's a lot that can sway you and change the perception of who you are, who you believe yourself to be, who you come from. You know, we have, they say, I think 7 generations within us, right? So when we do something like pouring libations and saying the name of our ancestors, we're actually calling forth that energy that is in our bones. We're calling it forward. So we're calling forward a resilience. We're calling forth the resilience of our ancestors who lived on plantations. We're calling forth the excellence of our ancestors that were on the continent. We are calling forward so much. And so sometimes when we are hyper-focused on what we see on the media, we can forget that what is already within us. So it's really important to really ground back and to reflect on what we have in our own family lines, in our own ancestral lines. All right, so co-regulation, what is it? So one of the things that we did earlier, the safe space visualization, is one of the ways that you can help to regulate your nervous system. But co-regulation is what happens between people, between 2 people or groups of people. Our earliest experiences with co-regulation are established between parent and child in infancy. This primary relationship determines how we self-regulate and how we create psychological safety with others. So as I mentioned, we experience co-regulation in our one-on-one interactions and among groups of people. We now understand that those who have experienced trauma have hypersensitive amygdalas, the area of the brain that is related to processing, emotional processing, and of course, memory, making them particularly aware of negative stimuli in their environment. So you're really good at picking up when something is off. I don't necessarily see this as a bad thing, because sometimes I think that is actually really linked to your intuition, and you're like, something's not right. You know, sometimes our traumatic experiences can help us to kind of navigate other challenging experiences. You know what to do. Co-regulation can help stimulate the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve, activates the parasympathetic, is connected to the parasympathetic nervous system, which controls bodily functions when a person is at rest. Some of these activities include stimulating digestion, activating metabolism, and helping the body to relax. So I always give the example of your body does not know the difference between a bear chasing you and a final exam. You're gonna process the stress the same way. You're gonna have a nervous system response. And there are areas of the body that's shut down when you are in fight or flight or freeze, right? So when you're overly stressed, your body is not going to prioritize digestion. It's not needed, right? You're running from a bear. You don't need to digest food. Reproduction shuts down. It's not safe to reproduce. Your body will not reproduce if it's not safe to do so. And the perception of safety, again, there's no discrimination. It's not like, oh, well, that's just an exam, so that's not really stressful, versus something life-threatening like a bear chasing you. So your reproductive system, digestive system, and your immune system, right? So the vagus nerve, when you are able to co-regulate with another person or with a group of people, it helps to put your body into that place of calm. Your parasympathetic nervous system is linked to what they call rest and digest, because you are now in that place of feeling safe in your body, and your body starts to send out the signals and the hormones that say, okay, everything's good, everyone, nothing to see here. So co-regulation in groups happens all the time. Singing in a choir, right? So the vagus nerve, as I mentioned, is connected to the parasympathetic nervous system, and it passes through the throat. I'll talk about that in a minute. But our enslaved ancestors were able to draw on retained cultural practices such as singing and drumming. So when you feel the vibration of the drum, it does something to you. Even now, if I hear the drum beat, I immediately have a sensory experience in my body. They would do call and response. So in the fields, working, singing. These were all used as ways to deal with traumatic experience, co-regulate, bring harmony in the bodies of many people. They could be observed storytelling, so using the voice, storytelling in the fields, finding opportunities to celebrate. As I said, Caribbean people, we're gonna find a way to not take life too seriously. There is a saying, so here's a proverb, or not really a proverb, but a saying. In Jamaica, we say, we take serious thing, make joke. We will make a joke of anything. The hardest situations, not gonna take things too seriously. So we really come from resilient people. So again, remembering that. So another example of co-regulation, in indigenous culture, they do something called throat singing. It is a beautiful way of establishing psychological safety and calming the nervous system. Throat singing stimulates the vagus nerve, because as I mentioned, it passes through the throat down into the chest. So it's like it branches off. It's connected to the heart. So it regulates your heart palpitations, those, you know, increased heart rate, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And it goes on into the stomach. So if you ever get butterflies or feel uncomfortable in your tummy when you feel stressed or nervous or anxious, again, that is a stress response. But, you know, and I will talk about some things that you can actually do practically to kind of immediately, you know, go from panic to like calm. So as I mentioned, throat singing, these guttural sounds improve the vagal tone. You're stimulating the vagal nerve as it passes through the throat. Meghan, I gave you a lot to try to translate there.
Yeah, we'll wait till the end.
Okay.
On va attendre pour
Sounds
la fin pour demander si des questions en français.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So so we're going to talk about self-care tools to support optimal mental health. All right, distress tolerance. What happens when you're in the moment, feeling anxious? The exam is upon you, you're sweating, somebody confronts you, you feel the anger boiling. What do? You know? There are many ways to transform the energy released in the body from exposure to stimuli in your environment. So again, you're responding to things that are happening around you or in you. What is important is having the right tools for the right moment. So there are some practical solutions in situations where you feel triggered. Like this is like particularly around anxiety, right? If you're feeling overwhelmed, including a cold compress. So you can do a cold compress to the chest, or you can do a cold compress to the back of the neck. You can also, you know, immerse your face in ice cold water for a few seconds. So studies actually show that placing a cold compress in these areas or doing the ice to the face or even taking a cool bath lowers your heart rate. I actually saw a TikTok video of a doctor doing this. He was in like a operating room and he had a glass, a bowl of ice cold water, and he hooked himself up to the monitors and he literally immersed his face for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and you could see his heart rate immediately starting to track down. So if you're feeling that quick trigger, though that cold compress is one of the ways that you can help. That can help. Another really great way is to, in the moment, is to do a few rounds of 4-8-4 breathing. So this is something I actually do with my clients. If they feel particularly anxious in a consultation, I will say, okay, let's do one round of this to kind of calm the nervous system. So the way that you're actually doing this, again, is stimulating that vagus nerve. So let's do a round of this now, everybody. So what you're going to do is inhale for a count of 4 seconds. Try to get as much air into your lungs as possible. And then at the top, when you get to the top of that, you're going to hold it, but you're going to bear down kind of like you're going to the bathroom. Don't go to the bathroom. But you're going to do that for like 8 seconds, hold it, and then release slowly for 4. Okay, so we'll do one round of it.
On pratique maintenant la technique de respiration 4, 8 et 4. On va respirer, puis on dit en français hold pour 8 secondes, puis respirer encore pour 4 secondes.
All right, so here we go. Big deep breath in. 4 seconds, count 4 seconds. Then hold it at the top, bear down. And slowly release. One more time. Okay, so big deep breath in, 4 seconds. 8 seconds, hold. And exhale. So if you were hooked up to a heart monitor, you would notice that your heart rate starting to go down as you do that exhale breath. Okay, so these tools are helpful for emotions rooted in terror or fear, anxiety, and overwhelm, right? However, you may also find that shaking or engaging in rigorous body movement really helpful for releasing energy. So you actually see this in the wild. There's this video of what do you call it now? People studying animals in the Antarctic. They want to study the polar bear. So they're in a helicopter and they are tracking the polar bear who is running, obviously scared. So they dart the polar bear from the helicopter. When they get down to the ground, the polar bear actually starts to shake really rigorously. And what they explain is that this is a way of the polar bear releasing energy from the body, that fear, that like, I just like was running for my life, oh my goodness, getting that energy out. And then you see the polar bear slowly starting to calm and like breathing quite heavily, right? So the shaking and then calming. So a lot of animals actually do this. For my son, when he's feeling particularly anxious, I'm like, do you have energy you need to get out? And I ask him to like shake his hands, shake his body. It's okay, you're not too old to do it. I do it. Sometimes you just need to get that energy moving, right? When you feel that sensation. Emotions though, so that's for like those emotions that make you feel kind of jittery, but the other emotions where you feel maybe sadness, such as grief and depression. So once you kind of acknowledge where you're actually experiencing that, a lot of times in TCM, in Chinese medicine, grief is experienced in the lungs. So connecting to the breath when you're feeling sad is really important, right? Taking in as much as you can through the lungs. But those more depressive emotions do really well with physical movement. So you're feeling down, you want to bring yourself up. You're feeling up, you want to bring yourself a little bit down. You're trying to find that really great sort of middle ground where you feel, where you're in that rest and digest mode. So, you know, dancing again, put some soca on, put some dancehall on, move the hips, move the energy out of the body, out of the joints. That can really do a lot to release any of those emotions that end up getting stuck. What they say, issues in your tissues, in your tissues. So when you experience an emotion in the past that you haven't actually given yourself a chance to process, and they kind of get stuck in the body and you feel aches and pains, or if you're with an emotion and you get that desire or feeling to just kind of move it out, these are some of the really great ways to do that. Cardio, power yoga are also some really great ways to do that.
I'm going to translate some of what you've shared. Yeah, there's all of it's very important, but I'll translate the best I can. So, le d'huile est vécu dans les poumons. Les émotions comme la peur et l'anxiété peuvent être régulées par le mouvement. Écouter de la musique et bouger est une forme de soin personnel. Déplacer les émotions qui restent bloquées, c'est prendre soin de soi. Mais si tu ne sais pas qu'est-ce que c'est les émotions et qu'est-ce que vos expériences sensorielles, vous ne pouvez pas faire rien qui est de soin de soi, de toi-même, parce que c'est juste normal pour vous. Mais vous pouvez changer ça, vous pouvez utiliser qu'est-ce qu'elle dit aujourd'hui pour respirer, placer de compresse froide sur votre poitrine, choses comme ça pour vous aider à bouger les émotions bloquées ou changer le temps que vous êtes dans cette émotion. Parce que si le temps est pour un temps qui est long, c'est pas bon pour votre santé mentale. All right. Cole's notes. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to something called nonviolent communication, communication non violente, radical empathy, empathie profonde. So violent communication can be displayed as deflection, displaced anger, which means like you're angry at something else and you're taking it out on another situation or person, gaslighting, judgment, gossip, arrogance, centering, which is just that self-absorption that we get caught into, blaming, name calling, and overall dismissiveness. There are many other forms of violent communication. I'm sure, and likely know that a lot of you have seen this in experiences of racism, but any experience of oppression, these are oppressive behaviors. And we also internalize these as well. La communication violente peut prendre la forme d'une déviation, d'une colère déplacée, d'un éclairage gazeux, d'un jugement, d'un bavardage, d'une arrogance, d'un centrage, d'un blâme, d'une injure ou d'un rejet. Il existe bien d'autres formes de communication violente, j'en suis sûre, et il est probable que vous puissiez y voir le regroupement de comportements racistes et oppressifs. Je vais démontrer la CNV, je dis en français la CNV. I want to demonstrate NVC. Here are the steps of nonviolent communication. You can see them on the screen now. For the purpose of this, it's reduced, and citing is from Unified Mindfulness Approach, which is the mindfulness college I'm under. Voici les étapes de communication non violente et cite l'approche de Unified Mindfulness. So la première est réflexion, so reflection. So répétez pour obtenir la confirmation avec qui vous parlez. So repeating back to confirm from the speaker. Now, I knew growing up, this isn't something that I learned. And it's not something that I saw my household do. I'm going to be honest. It was often depending on if the other person had capacity to, and typically, like all of us, we get absorbed in our own kind of bubble of what's going on within us. And that happens. So the reason that we're going to practice this today, I'm going to do a quick little practice with Saran so you can see how it works. So Saran is going to share a story with me of something very short that she has experienced. And so she's just going to share this experience with me. It doesn't have to be a bad experience or a good experience. It's not always to console. Je vais faire un roleplay avec Saran maintenant. Elle va donner une expérience et je vais montrer comment tu fais les 4 étapes. So here we go.
All right.
Hi, Saran.
Hi.
Hey, girl, hey. What's up, girl?
Nothing much. How's it going?
You know, I'm just here doing my thing. You said you wanted to tell me something. What do you want to tell me?
Yeah, so I was at the mall earlier today and I was backing the car out. You know, I just got the car. Backing the car out. There's somebody backing out at the same time in the opposite direction. I stop my car. I blow my horn. The person continues to back up. He hits my car. In that moment, I lost it. That's my story.
So what I
That's-
heard you say, Saran, is
Actually, that is a true story.
for the sake of this role play, I'm going to answer how I typically probably wouldn't answer to you, which would be probably some Jamaican swear words. And like, did you get them? But for the sake of this, just being vulnerable with everyone. Saran, from what I heard you say is you were at the mall, you were backing out your car, you notified somebody who was also backing up at the same time as you that you were backing up. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then they continue to back up and they hit your car.
That's it. I was mad.
Wow. Okay. That sounds really unfortunate. And I can only imagine what you're feeling right now. How are you feeling after experiencing that?
I'm incensed.
You're
very
what?
much. I'm sorry. The Jamaican wants to jump out telling you this story. Very, very angry. I really did. I had a moment where I really considered, I did the mindfulness stuff, Meghan. By the way, this is a true story, but it did happen like a good while ago. But I did think about it before I jumped out of the car. But my Jamaican wanted to jump out first and not be mindful. Just putting that out there. Okay, go ahead.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you were angry and that
Yes.
you had a reactional moment and that you were able to practice self-control.
I tried. Yes.
Okay. And you were aware of trying to practice self-control.
Yes, I was very aware of the fact that I was cussing off the man. I was telling him some things in my mind, but that wasn't, I also understand that that's not going to help anything because he wouldn't understand what I was saying anyway. I just asked for his intro, like all the details, but yes. It wasn't my first instinct, but I was able to stay mindful to an extent in the moment.
How do you want me to support you? Do you want me to just listen? Do you want me to give advice? Do you want me to cuss him out with you?
Let's get him.
How do you want me? Let's get him? Okay. Thank you for sharing this with me, Saran. I appreciate it. We're just playing around. But the purpose of it too is to acknowledge that how we think somebody needs to be supported is not always how they want to be supported. Because maybe I'm imposing how I would want to be supported onto Saran, but it actually doesn't allow for us to honor each other's truths and support Saran how she needs to be supported based on that truth. So I'll share that in French. La troisième que j'ai fait, le soutien, ne présume pas de la façon dont l'autre partie souhaite être soutenu. Demandez quelque chose comme comment puis-je vous soutenir? Souhaitez-vous que je vous donne des conseils, un retour d'information, un retour d'information ou que j'écoute simplement? And celebrate the person for sharing with you. Facilitez le personne. Remerciez-le d'avoir partagé avec vous. Il faut beaucoup de courage pour se connecter face à la peur d'être jugé, incompris, non écouté et invalidé. So celebrate the person because it takes a lot of courage to share feelings. It takes a lot of courage to share how we respond to things because as you could see, Saran was also judging herself in it. She was also like, I need to have more control. I was trying to be mindful, Meghan, thinking that that's what I wanted to hear, thinking that that's what I needed to hear, right? So that I wouldn't judge her for her response or her reaction. But the reality is for her just to even share that, we need to hold space for people, even parents that are on here for our kids. Les parents ici pour notre enfant, même si c'est les petits enfants. Moi, j'ai 5 filles et moi, j'essaie de faire ça, mais des fois que je fais quelque chose avec elle Okay, c'est pas bon pour elle. C'est juste pour moi. Sometimes I respond to my 5-year-old daughter the way that I think is best, but it's not actually best for her. It's not actually best for her. It's based on me and where I'm at. And we do this. We do this all the time to our friends, to our partners, to our children, and so on. And so practicing these, and I know it sounds kind of cheesy, you see me and Saran doing it, but the more you practice it, the more it becomes instinctual and becomes a habit that is healthy in terms of managing conflict, in terms of managing disagreements and having healthy communication. But we have to practice that self-awareness first so that we can then be able to do that. If we don't know how we're feeling and we can't identify it, and we don't know it's our responsibility, then we're struggling to be able to be there and be present fully with somebody else. And intimacy is not a romantic thing. Intimacy is something that happens in non-romantic dynamics as well. And so it's also really important to recognize that. L'intimité, c'est pas pour les relations romantiques. C'est toutes les relations des amis, de votre étude, de étudiant, de votre enfant, tes parents, tes cousins, comme tout le monde, ton neighbors, on dit en français, ton communauté, c'est tellement important de pratiquer des choses comme ça. All right. Oh yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I see in the note. I do this with my daughter. Yeah, I do this too. So it's a good practice to get into. All right, we're getting close to time here. I'm watching the time so that we have lots of time for Q&A. So Saran, you're gonna have to quicker.
All right.
On regarde le temps, on sait que le temps c'est presque demi-heure maintenant pour les questions. Là, on va aller tellement vite pour vous pour demander les questions au fin.
All right, so let's talk about self-care. You know, this is what this whole workshop is about. And it's interesting that, you know, or you might find it interesting that I'm including community support in self-care, because self-care always sounds like, well, I'm going to like relax in a tub and drink a glass of wine and eat some chocolates, or, you know, treat myself to a manicure, some alone time for self-reflection. And that is important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that stuff. But community support is extremely critical for our mental health. So true healing requires a balance between understanding your individual needs. That is, you know, your physical body needs, your thoughts, your habits, building self-awareness, and how support from others, interconnectivity, and collective effort play a part in well-being. So in this pandemic, you know, that has really been highlighted, you know, how important community is. And we've seen many communities growing across the internet, not just to provide support, but also to unify people based on common interests and values. So I have met so many people from across the globe in the last 2 years, more than I probably would have, just, you know, because of that desire to connect, you know, so many different interests, tech and Web3 and all crypto. You can find every type of community for any of your interests. Interests around culture and identity, you can find groups for that. As I mentioned, those big systemic issues that impact our mental health that, you know, is outside of our control, those actually require community effort. So think about things like cooperative economics and financial access through money pooling, access to healthy food through community gardens, you know, reducing isolation for older people, especially with home visits. I know that's kind of challenging just with the restrictions, but all of that contributes to a person's well-being. So I'm going to step back and really talk about that cultural identity piece again. This is par for the course if you're from African or Caribbean culture. You know, eating communally is something that you can witness in African cultures. Money pooling or susu or partner, right? This is how we come together as community to solve those problems. Like you have a child that needs to go to university and you need that first semester tuition, and you know, Caribbean parents or African parents, they throw in their partner or their susu to come up with that money. That is community. And so that stress of where am I going to find the money is alleviated. That big problem has a community solution, a solution through community. So remember, we still need to exercise self-compassion for the things we aren't able to change, you know, the things that are outside of our control. There is no shame, though, in seeking support when we are struggling to make sense of all that is happening around us. So Meghan touched on, you know, vulnerability and intimacy and relationship building with. So with these helpful tools, we can have meaningful discussions about creating safe spaces for compassionate inquiry within these community groups. So nights like this evening are really critical for us. It feels like a safe space. We can talk to each other. We know what we're talking about. When I say Silka, everybody know what I mean, probably, I'm guessing. There are certain things that we can talk about within community that maybe other people might not understand. What are some of the things that really are challenging for us? Facing anti-Black racism, the microaggressions, having a safe space within community to discuss that takes some of that edge off the experience and offers a space to be held, to be acknowledged, to be witnessed. So finding your community is key. Community is everything. Moving forward, the pandemic just kind of highlighted that. A lot of us, you know, do a lot of things, or we realize as human beings that we are truly geared for social, we are social beings. And not having access to that has been one of the most impactful things on our mental health. Okay, so this is my wheelhouse, everyone. So in my work as a wellness coach and menstrual health educator and all of that good stuff, I always look at root causes, because it's not like, oh, I just need to lose weight. If I could just lose weight. Well, what's happening in your environment? What's happening in your physical environment, mental environment? There's a lot of different factors that are going to impact that. So self-care looks like community care, but it also looks like what you eat, how you move your body, and how you rest. So we're going to zoom into those sort of individual efforts that we make. If we are addressing the systemic limits to access to healthy foods, so if you're participating in a community garden, for example, it is still our personal responsibility to use the resources available to create habits that will sustain us. Our digestive health, as I mentioned, is particularly vulnerable to stress. This can lead to the malabsorption of critical nutrients. So as I said, your body is not prioritizing digestion. And I could go into the whole explanation of what happens, but basically it can lead to a lot of inflammation that just snowballs into chronic illnesses. So as much as possible, it's important to reduce your intake of highly processed foods. That's tough. But the best way, and especially if you're having, part of your emotional response is to eat things that feel comforting, right? It can be a challenge. But the best way to optimize digestive function and eat well is to keep it simple. I tell all my clients and everybody, if it's in your house, you're gonna eat it. If it's not there, you can't eat the imaginary cookies. It's one of the ways that I've learned to practice a certain discipline with my diet, is to just not buy it. because it will get eaten. The chocolate cake, ask Meghan. There are times I will go out of my way for it, though. I'm not gonna lie. So, you know, stick to the outer aisles of the supermarket. So you know where you have fresh fruits and vegetables, those are on the outer aisles. The more you go in, the more processed the foods, the more ingredients you're gonna get. So if you wanna keep it simple, stay on the outer aisles. Lots of fresh fruits, vegetables, those are still relatively inexpensive compared to packaged goods. Meat is outrageous.
You have a comment. Somebody doesn't go to the grocery store while they're hungry, which is also really important. If you go when you're hungry, you're gonna get everything you don't really need, but everything you want. And this is back to that craving and aversion. We can see that same cycle that's happening, that cycle of humanity, right? Of being a human being, of constantly being in this craving and avoidance. And so you're craving to feel better because you are not feeling great being hungry. So you're trying to avoid or satisfy that and meet that body sensation with an item, and that's the food. And so it's just important to be aware of, like, how does that show up in micro levels and macro levels within our being day to day. So really good points. Yeah, don't go to the grocery store hungry.
And you know, one of the really interesting ways to kind of notice what it is that is actually at the root. There's a wonderful book called Constant Cravings. The root tells you about the root cause of your cravings, right? So craving for sweet is like wanting the sweetness of life, or craving for salty, crunchy foods is like anger, like you're frustrated and you want to kind of get that out in the crunch. Or, you know, ice cream actually has tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin, which is an antidepressant. So ice cream is actually antidepressant. So your body actually will crave these things. It will tell you where you need the support. I am not a fan of taking away people's coping mechanisms unless you're replacing it with something else that feels just as good. So it's one of those things, you know, to be mindful of. So supplements may be necessary. Vitamin D, for example, essential for mental health, and omega-3s. The difference you can experience taking vitamin D consistently and omega-3 fatty acids consistently during winter months, I am telling you, huge difference. So that's for mood and mental health, other things as well, but that's for another session. We don't get much vitamin D from the sun, obviously, in the winter. And if you have melanated skin, it's even more critical. Magnesium is often really deficient as well in our diets. And that actually is one of those nutrients that helps to calm the nervous system, relax the muscles. So Epsom salts is magnesium. They have the magnesium sprays, but also magnesium supplements. Magnesium helps to relieve the anxiety, as I mentioned, and it actually helps to support hormone balance, which of course, again, important for menstruating people. And it supports cardiovascular health. To make it easy, so I know it's hard, like taking supplements, sometimes they're just not there where it is. So making it easy is the best way to make sure you're taking consistently. So put it somewhere that's high visibility, right? If you have a water bottle you pick up every day, put it beside the water bottle. If you have fruit that you pick up every day, whatever it is. For me, I take magnesium at night. It is something that I never forget to take because it's right beside my bed, like it's the thing, when I put my sleep mask on, it is right there. And I always have a glass of water ready, so I don't forget to take it. And then finally, you know, movement, right? Movement and exercise. We sometimes think that it means that we need to join a gym or, you know, attend a yoga class or go into, we like the communal feeling of that. But again, think back to the lifestyle of our ancestors. They didn't have gyms. They didn't have that type of formalized way of moving the body. But they would dance, you know, they would do different things. They didn't have a sedentary lifestyle either. So a lot of our issues have to do with the fact that we are much more sedentary than our ancestors. It's not the diet that our ancestors ate. It's that we, like, if you're in the Caribbean and you still eat a traditional diet and you still have chronic disease, it's probably because we're more sedentary than our ancestors were. They never spent any time in the house, right? So walking, dancing, sweating is critical for releasing toxins out of the body. The skin is your largest organ. You need to be sweating even if it's in the dead of winter. So movement and exercise helps with those feel-good hormones. Magnesium, okay, I'll answer that question. Finally, sleep. This can be a really tough one for so many reasons. Adrenal fatigue or burnout will have you waking up at 2 or 3 a.m. Hands up if you wake up at that time. This is a good indication that your cortisol levels are high and that you are experiencing high levels of stress. Having good physical activity during the day can promote restful sleep at night, reducing the use of electronics before bed, and taking tepid, cool showers, as I mentioned, before bed can all help you rest better. Ultimately, taking small steps to better mental health is within our control. If you can choose one area of your life to work towards and making incremental improvements, that small step will ultimately lead to overall improvement. So Meghan will take over and talk, and with the next slide, building a little bit more on this.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, no, we're done.
Oh, that's it.
We're done. So we're on time. So si vous avez des questions en français, de quelque chose que Saran a dit aujourd'hui, if you have just questions in general, to either of us, now is your time. So we got 10 minutes. I apologize if anybody wants to stay over, we can stay a few extra minutes to make sure that we engage with you. And if
I think we have more time than that though.
I think
we end at 8:30, no?
That's right. The time slot is until 8:30.
Okay, so we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got lots of time for questions. So we're right on time here. And if you are interested in booking a session with Saran, she does incredible work in terms of, she has a course for individuals right now that are menstruating peoples, but it doesn't have to be just for those that are actual menstruating people. It can be those that want to be educated on it. It's really powerful in the education system to have this type of education as well. And it's just overall very powerful to understand what that looks like, and her holistic approach, I highly recommend it. So if you are interested in any type of support to anything that she shared today, you can find her at Wellness by Saran on the gram. Are you on TikTok yet? Are you TikToking yet?
Yeah, I cannot. I
okay,
can't.
So TikTok. So
there's a resistance there. Y'all help me out.
So the Twitters and the grams, you can find her there. And same with me, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well, to explore further about what we offer and how we can support your mental health and your self-care. It's just really important for us to understand that self-care is not selfish, and that self-care is a very powerful form of activism. It's a very powerful form of caring for our community by setting the example of what rest looks like and what self-care looks like. And there's boundaries that come with that as well. And this is where things like nonviolent communication and everything else that was shared here today help us to be able to communicate more effectively with each other, to be able to set those examples and prioritize ourselves so that we can break some of those intergenerational trauma bonds that we have and behaviors that we have related to self-betrayal and martyr type identities where we have to be always giving externally and never be giving inward. So that is how I will end this. And thank you all for joining us today. Any comments?
Yeah, we have a few questions. Okay, so let me start with the one on magnesium.
Yes.
What's magnesium good for? Maybe the better question is, what is magnesium not good for? There's a whole book called Magnesium Miracle, a whole book written on magnesium, the benefits of it. So I would say primarily, as I mentioned, it helps to calm the nervous system, helps to relieve anxiety, helps to relieve constipation. It helps with muscle, relaxing the muscles, as I mentioned, helps with hormone balance, blood sugar regulation. There are many, many things that it is really helpful for. It's one of the nutrients that is deficient because magnesium is found in the soil. And depending on the quality of the soil that your vegetables grow in, it's going to affect the magnesium levels in the food that you have. And that's not universal across the board. In fact, a lot of the foods that we eat are severely, like the soil is not good. The soil is poor quality. So we're not getting enough of that nutrient. So often most people find it really helpful. There's no toxicity really. It's just that if you take too much, you will get diarrhea, like you will go to the bathroom a lot. There are some forms of magnesium that are gentler. So like magnesium glycinate, for example, is better for, calm and anxiety. The oxalate, magnesium oxalate, for example, is if you have constipation, you really need to move things along. But for general maintenance, magnesium glycinate is quite good. Do you want to answer the question about?
I have a private question because the person wants to remain private, which is totally fine for you, Saran. So I'll go back to the other one, but just because you're already talking, let's go into this a little bit more. So you are the first health expert that I have heard mention reproductive health while discussing the body's response to stress and trauma. This got me thinking about the high levels of fibroids amongst Black women, which Saran and I talk about all the time because I have fibroids. Saran's actually helped me treat a kidney stone that didn't pass. She helped dispel it. So I don't know if the word is, but break it down so it didn't actually pass. So very important here, especially those of Caribbean descent. Can you speak to any research that links trauma, particularly intergenerational trauma and fibroids?
100%. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about.
I know. I'm like,
do we have do you want to take the whole half an hour?
I'm like, okay, let me just ask you this question, let you go off on.
So yes, fibroids, especially in our community, North America particularly. So fibroids, for everyone for those who may not know, are non-cancerous growths in the uterus, and they can grow pretty big. There's a lot of different factors there. You will hear, oh, it's the hormones, so excess hormone, estrogen dominance, exposure to xenoestrogens or toxins, microtoxins, plastics in your, Tupperware, BPA, multiple factors. But what often doesn't get addressed is the fact that there is a link to intergenerational trauma. So in my work with women who have fibroids, there's often something in the family lineage. And I had a young woman who actually is now a really good friend of mine. You could probably find the video in if you go to my Instagram, one of the lives that I did with Carice, and we talk about fibroids and her approach. So looking at diet is fine. Exercise is fine. She was actually vegan, but she went through intense ceremony, spiritual work, connecting with her ancestors. And what came through that, there were many ancestors who had trauma to the womb, whether that is, you know, sexual assault from, you know, it's a trigger warning here, please. Ancestors who experienced that, you know, on the plantation. There were all these ancestors that were coming up, and, you know, she worked with different spiritual practitioners to help to move this energy. And it was a very cathartic process, and it took 2 years, 2 whole years of ritual and ceremony, and yes, dietary changes and all of those things. But a lot of her focus was on healing that intergenerational trauma, talking to her mother who had a hysterectomy, talking to her grandmother, talking about the idea of how much we put onto ourselves as womb space holders. We put the cape on, right? We're super women. We're, you know, and so these are the things that you're not necessarily going to have conversations about when you go to a tradition, you know, allopathic doctor. They give you a certain set of tools to deal with it, which in my opinion is very limited. It doesn't help, you know, because it's a very complex issue. There's not a lot of research to answer your question, to be honest. And this is one of the things that I'm working on even this year, after having many conversations last year with other people in the menstrual health and hygiene space. The fact that we don't have enough representation, the fact that we are given limited options for treatment. We have a high rate of hysterectomy in our community, more so than other races. And that has a lot to, and it comes across as unintended sterilization. So when you only give one treatment option of hysterectomy, when a person comes to you with fibroids, it is really limiting your choices. They also don't look at how fibroids impact your mental health, because there's a hormonal correlation as well. So often it is accompanied with depression. Often people are thinking about planning their lives around sometimes 10, 14 days of excess bleeding that can come with that. And so there is not enough, there aren't enough conversations about it, first of all, and there isn't enough research. And that's something that we really need to work on changing, for sure.
Another question about PCOS.
Oh, I'm getting all the menstrual the menstrual questions.
Yeah, so there's lots of thank yous, because I know this is why I love Saran. I'm biased. Is because there is a lack of education in these subjects, and there's a lot of shame around these things, including fertility as well. And it's kind of like how racism becomes racialized people's problems only, in a conditioning way. That's conditioning that we're psychologically taking on, that these things are women's problems only, or those that have a womb identifying with that, right? When it's not. This is a problem that we all need to be aware of, and that we all need to be doing our part in educating ourselves in. And so, it's, you know, grateful to have Saran here, and we're focused a little bit more on that. But I just invite those that aren't womb holders to see this as a really good opportunity to understand what impacts us, and to understand how this impacts our self-care, understand how this impacts our mental health, You know, there's jokes in misogynistic approaches and patriarchal approaches to gender that, you know, you're cranky because you're on your period. You must be, you must have PMS. But what is PMS, right? What does that mean to menstruate? And, you know, and the colonized way of looking at menstruation is, oh God, here it is again, my bleed. Where Saran really introduced me to reframing that. And again, I'm not unlearning those things. I've just reschooled myself and reframed it as I celebrate my menstrual cycle when it comes. I meditate in those time frames. Sometimes I pull tarot to understand what else, why are these things showing up? Why am I so angry? What's going on in my mood? What did I eat? What else is happening? What's going on in my intimate relationship with who I may be holding room space with if we're sexually intimate, right? And understanding those things and how those things impact us overall. And for those that are having intimacy and aren't womb holders with those that are womb holders, understanding how your energy and what you're coming in with impacts us as women as well, you know, or womb holders, I should say. We have non-binary individuals that are womb holders as well. So just to be, and transgender, just to be, just to use this as a contemplative practice now. What are you seeing, hearing, and feeling as Saran is sharing this education with everyone tonight? So answer on PCOS, and then I'll go back to some of the other questions.
Yes. So there's that intersection between mental health and menstrual health that we don't talk about. It's kind of like, you know, the dirty little secrets. But for menstruating people, this is a real intersection. This is something that we experience every month. You know, at certain time of the month, you're going to probably feel a way, and that's different than at another time. And that's okay, it's actually normal. I would like us to normalize the fact that our moods change. It's a biological process. And then using those mindfulness practices that Meghan mentioned during that time, because it's an opportunity. PMS is not like the worst thing that will ever happen to you. It will tell you where you need to pay attention in your life. Something's not working. You're kind of letting something slide that shouldn't. You didn't necessarily process your emotion in a way that allows you to feel safe, right? These are all opportunities that come. So for menstruating people, the mental health perspective of things tends to be more cyclical. So you can feel on top of the world when you're in your ovulatory phase and feel like the worst person on the planet. In your, like what, like the questions, the imposter syndrome, everything attacks you all at once. And it's actually normal. Obviously, if it is the fact that you're having suicidal ideation or like PMDD, which is like quite severe shifts in moods, then that's something that needs to be addressed. However, it is possible. I have clients with PMDD that, you know, with changes to the diet and supporting the hormonal cycle, the mental health shifts, right? So not having as much brain fog.
Can you give, what does PMDD stand for, please?
Oh, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So it's like really severe PMS, like times 10, where, you know, I have clients that literally at a certain time of month, she would like message me like, I don't feel good. Like my mental health is not in a good place. I feel really clumsy. I can't focus. I have complete mental fog. So, like I said, suicidal ideation, it's more severe. Yes.
The other question was about PCOS. Can you also give what that acronym is?
Oh, what was the question? Can you? Just
to talk about PCOS.
Okay, so polycystic ovarian syndrome, it is a syndrome. It's like, for every person, it can look different. So for some people, it's actual cysts on the ovaries, or they have delayed menses, or they don't have a they don't bleed every month. They have facial hair, what they call it, hair, I can never say that word, hirsutism. they have elevated androgen levels, and it can come with, again, those changes in the hormones actually can affect the mental health as well. PCOS that actually responds really well to lifestyle changes. So all the things that we talked about, getting adequate rest, diet, exercise, especially like weight-bearing exercise, and just like really monitoring your stress levels. Like PCOS and stress go hand in hand. They're like besties. So if you are, you know, I definitely look at ways to modulate the stress response in the body. It's really critical if you have PCOS.
Thank you. I saw a postpartum question in there as well. Is there also a relationship to postpartum, and if so, has it increased during the pandemic? Yeah.
I also have a live for that. So
Yeah.
Meghan, if you want to, so we talk about with Anika, we talked about postpartum depression, like mental health, and why that happens. Again, you know, community support is really, really, really critical postpartum. It can be very challenging. Your hormones are going wild. Like it takes a while to normalize, and all of those, the way that the hormones are changing is impacting your mental health. So for more on that, where I, you know, go into some explanation of what is happening hormonally. Sometimes it's a thyroid issue, you know, progesterone, low progesterone issue, just adjusting that. You can find that, you know, me talking more about that in that live, if Meghan can find it.
I can try, yeah, after. Okay, so I'm gonna go back up to the other questions. So there was a question around, well, somebody also commented, so I really appreciate this comment. Boxing has been a great way of taking care of myself. It's been very difficult during the pandemic and snowy weather. I agree, movement like that, boxing is not always what we see it as in terms of not necessarily a sport and a way to just get out aggression. When you learn how to box as a sport, it actually is a really good way to get movement in. And yes, maybe channeling some of those more difficult emotions because of the level of shaking and the mindful approach to how you're approaching that as well. So any type of sport or exercise that you gravitate towards, or even if you're willing to try something, find somebody that is well trained in it that can support you through that. I know somebody who teaches like Muay Thai and boxing, who's a personal trainer who's very holistic, like Saran, in the Ottawa area. I can give her information for that if anybody's interested. It's also a great way to practice self-care. And then another question was whether or not crying should be painful despite it being healthy, like working out and getting sore even if you burn calories. So that lethargic cry. I do have those moments. Again, community is really important. Sometimes I don't give myself the permission to cry on that really deep level. And yes, you can have physical sensations associated with crying. So crying is not always going to be just the physical sensations of the tears on your cheeks and the breath maybe becoming more shallow, and that, you know, type of a physical sensation or sensory signals. It may be deep crying and so on that you're going through. And when we can apply equanimity to it, we can allow ourselves to be in that without trying to change it or judging ourselves. You know, considering it as a concern is only really just the judgment of it. It's not a concern if you are able to accept that that is what's supporting you in that moment and that that is what you need to be doing. That's it. That would be my answer to it. I think you know, the reality of answering that is it's all dependent on how you validate those emotions within yourself and how you validate the expression of those emotions. So trust yourself to know whether it's something that you need and whether it's something that you're accepting. You always know the answer within yourself. I'm just guiding, Saran's here just guiding, but those answers are always intuitively within yourself when you give yourself the room to be in them. And there's a question navigating broaching self-care with employers to assist and not just hearing lip service from them, especially with what has been experienced in the last 2 years to our community. Yeah, I was in HR before I was in this field, so I know that there's a lot of talk of self-care and taking the time to have self-care. Some really kind of key things that you can do is just set really strong boundaries with your employer. And I'm not going to be on my computer after this time. I won't be answering my phone. I don't want a device that you can access me on any time. And if you do give me one, you won't be able to access me in these times. And any role that you take on, to be very clear on what work-life balance looks like for you. That is, those are kind of some like high-level tips. For more, it would probably require more of a consultation call, to be honest, but and how the culture of the company is because the culture of the company, like Saran saying, around culture and how we're building culture, it's something that's based on values and how those values are exhibited in behaviors. And so whatever the company values are, if they're not exhibiting them in behaviors and they're not trying to disrupt hierarchical type forms of management and so on, then that is not really going to allow, coming from the top down, right? If that's the structure of it, it may not be so inclusive to self-care practices that we actually need culturally, right? And so just to be mindful of all those things. I know we have to give about 10 to 15 minutes to allow ACMP to close up. But I see some really great questions here. Some questions about prenatal depression that were sent to me as a direct message privately, and then questions around seasonal affective disorder. Pressing your face or the window for the limited sunlight. Yeah. Quickly, I will say I've used a lot of Saran's tips. One thing this year that I did differently was just to acknowledge that the new year, as we see it in this colonized form in January 1st, that puts all the pressure on us gearing up to like have our beach bodies ready for the summer and to take on all these New Year's resolutions. When we look at astrologically and to some of our indigenous beliefs, it's March and we follow a lunar cycle. And now we're in a system that doesn't really honor that. And to be aware that seasonal affective disorder, because of the vitamin D that Saran's talking about and what we are not getting in the environment, can impact us in a negative way. So to slow down in those times, just like if we look at nature as our biggest teacher, you look at the seed that's in the soil, before that seed emerges into greenery, it's in darkness. And so when we're in the winter times and we look at bears that hibernate and we look at what nature's doing and so on, then we're also seeing that as an opportunity to rest and to not put so much pressure on ourselves based on this conditioning that the new year looks like this, that winter's supposed to be like this, that we're supposed to feel like this, supposed to, should, shouldn't, supposed to, should, shouldn't. And we're able to give ourselves a little bit more room from that perspective as well. So I'll leave it at that.
I would add, seriously, don't discount the actual supplementing. And I don't mean, I can't tell you how much to take because, I can't. But you take supplementing vitamin D, everybody talks about it. It's not just for fun. Like, it actually makes a huge difference if you're consistent. And I would add, as I mentioned, omega-3 fats. So to Meghan's point, think about where we live. We live in Canada. It's cold. Nothing's happening. In indigenous communities, we can learn so much from that culture on how to survive, how to become resilient in this climate. So their diets are actually very high in omega-3s because of they eat whale and seal meat, and fish, which is all very, very high, like out of this world, high in omega-3s and vitamin D. They're getting their vitamin D from their diet. So when I talk about omega-3, you know, you get that from your fish products, right? Salmon and trout, etc. But supplementing again can actually take you into the therapeutic category of things, right? So really kind of being aware that some of these things, as we talked about, right, are within your control. And sometimes it feels hard to get there at first because like you have to kind of, you feel not great. So feeling not great makes you not want to do anything. But the answer to not feeling great lies in some of these other things. And for me personally, I can say that vitamin D and omega-3 consistently have been a game changer in terms of my mood. Now, I study herbal medicine. There's lots of herbs as well, but this comes back to the traditions, as you know, looking at traditional medicines and how we live with the land and how we integrate nature into our beings. These are all ways to build resilience.
So we'll pass it off to Peter to take it away to conclude. Thank you everyone for all the great questions. Thank you for having us. And we really appreciate all the engagement. Thank you.
That was great. Actually, I would like to formally thank both of you for attending and for sharing both your expertise and your experiences with us. This has been amazingly helpful, and I've learned a lot personally, and I think our audience has also gotten a lot out of that. So again, I'd like to give it up for you for attending. So thanks again to both of you. If you want to reach out to Saran or Meghan, we will have their websites listed on our own website, which will also include a list of other mental health resources, some of the things we've covered through the other events that we've had during the month of January. So if you are interested in getting more information, there will be a page of resources posted for you on our website, which is www.weareacmp.com. Before you go, we do have one prize giveaway. So as a result of us being able to interact and work with a wide variety of mental health professionals, we would like to gift one of our attendees today with an individual session with one of those professionals. And so without further ado, I'm gonna share the prize wheel here, and let's see who our lucky winner for tonight is. Congratulations, Grace with a capital G. Grace, are you with us? You can turn on your microphone or you can type in the chat.
Hi, yes, thank you so much.
Congratulations, Grace. So if you would be so kind as to share your email with either, you can send a direct message to me or to our ACMP tech admin. We will get your contact information and we'll get you set up with that prize as soon as possible. All right. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Adele, if you don't mind throwing up the poster for our upcoming event, which is the February Black History Month. We have a couple of events planned, including our big keynote addresses that will be happening on February 25th. After that, I know Adele mentioned it in the chat in March. That's a big month for us. That's going to be our Women's Empowerment Month. So hopefully we'll be able to get a couple of more knockout guests like we had tonight for March. But otherwise, I just want to thank everyone again for attending. Thank you to our guests, Saran and Meghan, for sharing so much with us tonight. And take care. We'll see you at our next one. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.